Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and I got a special treat for you today. We have a phenomenal opportunity to conduct an interview with two special people, and one of which I know a little bit more than the other, but I am looking forward to hopefully getting some nice equality of love spread out between the both of them. So today we have with us our two guests, which is Duhz and Steelhard, a.k.a. our boy Chad Thunder C, for all my OGs out there who know him by that, from Kingdom 32, currently now in SSS1-11, which is comprised between 32, 34, and 46, and 48. So, anyways, without further ado, me rambling too much, welcome, Duhz, Steel. How are we doing, guys?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, man.
For this opportunity to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, no, listen, just as much as equally an opportunity for me. I always enjoy being able to talk to as many people as I can, you know, in the community as often as we're able to, and trying to find some nice and good, unique opportunities. So just as equally my pleasure on that. So let's do this. And again, regardless of maybe what order to maybe kind of help flow here, if we will, if maybe Steel wants to go and Duhz can go kind of in order of responses, just so in case we don't end up having some overlap in the comms. I probably said that before, but if you guys are cool with that.
If possible, just start with Duhz, because I just got to do something real quick. It's like 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. No worries, no worries. All right, so in that case, let's do this. Duhz, starting with you, why don't you give us a little bit of an intro on your upbringing? Again, have you played Kingdom Builders before CoD? Was CoD your first? What have you really kind of dipped your toes in before finding out? And then secondly, I'd love to know, how did you find out about CoD?
So yeah, man, appreciate you having us on here. It's awesome. An avid follower, and I always commend your work ethic, bro. So thank you so much. So for me personally, I started playing these types of kingdom builders, as you would call it. Started in Rise of Kingdoms. It's probably 2020, roughly, or 2019. I can't remember exactly. Maybe towards the tail end of 2019 is when I started playing Rock. And I started playing Rock before you had any kind of KvK format and things like that. So quite familiar with the game in a beta stage. And then progressed over roughly about 2 years through Rise of Kingdoms, pushed T5 there, and had a lot of fun. Met a lot of crazy people. So the cool thing about it is when you played in an environment where it's like pre-KvK, you kind of have to figure out how to establish community. I think that's one of the most important elements of any of these types of games, is the community that you plant your flags in, and then how you guys kind of grow from there. And that's a really big it's kind of like our threshold, or rather our environment in 32 is community. We like to be in Discord a lot. So, and it's kind of cool because how did I start in, I found out about Call of Dragons in Chisel stream. And from that point, I funneled, looked on YouTube and was trying to find as much, information as possible, because you couldn't really access the game unless you played some sort of through some VPN or something. So that's what I did. And then from there, everything kind of moved on. Jumped in a project, which ended up being S5.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, man. And I remember. And you still play there, though. In at least I know you still have an account. I don't know if you still, so I shouldn't assume.
Yeah, I do. So I'm currently, funny enough, I'm actually in TM. Currently in TM right now. Ghost is a really good buddy.
Yep.
So we've been kind of kicking and burning as well as my bro.
Okay.
So we're after S5 was over, we did the old S5 through, what was it, S6, I think.
Yeah.
No, S1 through S6. It was S1 through S6, the big old merger, the controversial merger. And then, after that season, we had a downtime, and TM, Ghost, and then a lot of those guys, they reached out, and we figured out something where, we could kind of merge and get ready for a fun season. That's what we're doing now.
Awesome. Yeah, man. No, Ghost is good people, and It was a pleasure being able to have an opportunity to interview Burning too as well. Man, that guy was pretty funny in some of the responses on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it as professional as possible for you, brother.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We can keep it Liddy Biscuits anytime. All right,
Awesome.
Steel. Let's move over to you. Our second main man. So again, just intro. What's your background as far as Kingdom Builders wise? Did you do anything kind of in that genre of the space before coming over to CoD, and then how did you find out about CoD?
So, I've been playing these kinds of games for a very long time, right? Even before the mobile games came out. Like I used to play Tribal Wars, Travian, like those all kind of games that were also Kingdom Builders back then. A lot of them don't even exist anymore. Some of them do. Then I just transitioned into mobile games a few years back, and that's when I found Rise of Kingdoms. Yeah. I started playing, I don't know, maybe like 4 years ago. Played for 3 years, played in a bunch of different kingdoms, from B to A seed kingdoms. Eventually ended up joining... Well, I didn't end up joining, but I met a lot of cool people from Rise of Kingdoms. Some of them leaders from Imperiums like 307 and stuff like that, and one of them actually told me about CoD, this new game that was coming out that was very similar to Rise of Kingdoms. So I took a look, and at the time you couldn't really download the game from where I'm from in Portugal, because the game was limited in the beta to a bunch of Asian countries, to England I believe, and Canada I think. So at the time I had to download a VPN just to be able to download the game and give it a try. I couldn't even pay anything, I couldn't do anything like regarding getting Lilia, for example. I had to play 2 whole seasons without Lilia.
Yeah, I remember that back at the day.
Yeah, it was very painful. But I started playing, and the moment I started playing, it just clicked me, and like, yeah, there's no way I'm coming back to Rise of Kingdoms after this. So,
no, I got you.
Yeah.
No, awesome.
Yeah, I ended up quitting Rock, and I just dedicated myself completely to Call of Dragons.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. You know what's interesting is some people may not know this about you, Steel. And so, I like to privy myself to be somewhat of a historian, at least as much as I can. And you were actually pretty instrumental early on in the beta, speaking out about, and really kind of speaking more as an advocate for them improving the way that we were able to expand out into Zone 1 regions, because obviously there was that rampant, essentially just the CF hopping that was happening, where people were going build CF, TP, destroy, build CF to the next gate, and then they were just basically zone hopping incredibly fast. And I remember reading a long post from you, and I can't remember if you posted this at Help or Gen Chat at the time. This is, I think, before they had the suggestions channel really up and running. But you had posted something, say it was like a paragraph, 2 paragraphs long, and you were really detailing out as an advocate for them to try and improve the way that we were able to expand from Zone 1s, because of how rampant it was in some of the early beta kingdoms, where alliances were, some, not obviously all the kingdoms, but some were really exacerbating this and just kind of going and just destroying. And just doing a lot of attacking in the zones, and kind of leaving destruction in their wake as they were hopping. And I remember reading this post where you were initially talking about, hey, it would be cool if we could limit CFs to their Zone 1, but then you still were able to go out and build adjacently. And even though it took a little while, we ended up seeing kind of 2 updates later that really started getting it to the point of where we're at now. And I'm just curious what your thoughts were on that, if you enjoyed seeing, and again, obviously I'm not saying that, they just took what you said and it was like 100%, oh yeah, this was Steel who pushed it, but you were a very big advocate for it in the beginning. I remember even talking about it as well in some early videos and referred to your post. But I'm curious, how do you feel from someone as a community member at that time, and I can't remember if you were a mod at that point or not, but regardless, you posted something. You felt very passionate about it. You detailed out what you felt was the explanation or the justifiable reasons for a change, and then you see that change happening. How did that make you feel?
Right. So, just for some context, right? When I first started playing this game, I didn't even lead any alliances at all. Yeah. I was just your average member, So stuff happened in my kingdom, and my R5 had to quit the game because he was in an Empiricum in Rise of Kingdoms, so he just didn't have the time. Yep. And at the time, I was promoted to an R4 because I was helping him, and that's when he promoted me to an R5, right? And then that's when things really started getting crazy, right? Because, like, I played these games for a very long time, like I said, but I never really had the experience of actually leading that way. Like, I always felt I was capable, but I never took the initiative to do it. I just never felt the interest in actually leading an alliance. But it suddenly just fell on my lap, and one thing about me is that I'm very responsible, and I like doing the best I can in any situation. I want to always do everything I can to get the best results possible, because I just feel responsible, right? Because if I have 150 people under me, I feel responsible for their accounts, for their well-being, for the rewards that's good towards them, and if I'm not giving my 100%, it just feels like I'm letting them down. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it led me to elevate my passion for the game. And like I said, the CFs at the time were something that was being abused, even by us. I'll be honest. We also abused it in our season 1 because it was. I mean, it was just too good to pass out on. To be honest, like it was completely broken, and you could just abuse it for instant backup anywhere in the map. It was super strong, and it was strong, but it was also very, very toxic, right? Because if you wanted to, you couldn't make any alliance quit by force, because there was truly no safe place anywhere. So I abuse it, but at the same time, I don't like abusing these kinds of things to make other people quit, and I saw that happening in other servers. So I just felt compelled to do something about it, and the best way, in my opinion, to do that, since I didn't have direct connections to the devs, right, was just try to write a detailed post about why this is broken and what could be done to fix it. And yeah, like, if I'm not wrong, if I go back, I'm 99.9% sure that the way they changed the CFs was exactly like I said, which was to essentially lock your CF to your home region, right? Because then you can no longer do that, right? You still have the freedom of moving anywhere in your home region, but you can no longer just cheese around the map.
Yeah.
Which does give far more security to people in other regions. Overall, I think the CEO devs have been doing a very, very good job overall with the updates, and even listening to the community to an extent. I don't think it's perfect, but clearly I think they are taking. I think they're in a good spot right now, and I think they're continuing to improve that. The game is still new, and I think it comes with time, right? Rise of Kingdoms was way worse than Call of Dragons was at this time. Like, Rise of Kingdoms took over a year to implement KvK, if I'm not wrong, from what I recall. Yeah. So it's just a time frame, right? You just gotta give them time, and everything will fall into place, hopefully.
Yeah, man. No, that is definitely the hope. Well, all right, man. No, thanks. I appreciate you letting me know, and I would tend to agree. I do think there's been a little bit more positive outlook on some of the recent updates and changes that have been hitting, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later as well. So let's push forward a little bit, and I want to talk about Blood Family and kind of how this came to pass. And Duhz, I'll start with you on this. Is again, I'd first love to know one. Now, how I saw initially when Blood Family was being recruited for, even prior to Chisgul doing his post about joining up. From my understanding, it was mainly supposed to be kind of a 1-2 alliance project, where the focus was we just want to recruit predominantly spenders, and then obviously any kind of heavy contributing free to play or high activity free to play as well, but was kind of being promoted or publicized more so as that is let's recruit as many spenders as we can and try to get, and then obviously kind of trickle in anyone else, but then focus on kind of 1-2 alliances going in. So I'm curious for your perspective, Duhz. One, I'd love to know, how did you come about joining the project before you landed in 32? Were you already a part of it initially? Did you join because you had some people there? Did it just appeal to you? Did you like just kind of what their outlook was? What was it that attracted you there to that specific project's view?
So that's a good question. So, BN, I don't know if you remember, S5 was Blood Family as well.
Yeah.
So BDL, Abda the Beast, shout out to Abda, kind of had a project going early on in S5, or before S5 rather, to kind of have this test server, so to speak, where we kind of get our feet wet.
Here you go.
I had found out about the project through a Chisgel stream one day, and Abda's one of the moderators there. So he was talking about it, and I'm watching a Chisgel stream at the time. At this point, I had quit Rise of Kingdoms a little over 2 years, right? And you kind of always go back and you're like, I miss it, what could have been, stuff like that. But then I realized that they had some very toxic additions to the game, like armaments and stuff. So, still thankful that I made that decision when I did. So then I'm looking at the stream, and I see in the chat that they're talking about this new game called Call of Dragons. So I look it up, and I'm like, holy crap, this thing is kind of crazy. The graphics, the combat mechanics look insane. You've got range combat mages. It looks, mythical. I was like, man, I'm into that. So I hit up Abda. I'm like, look, hey, how do I join this project? And so, they invited me to this Discord server, and that's kind of how everything began. We started in S5, and that's where the Blood family initially started. Made a good impact in the first season, won our first season, and then built a little bit of a reputation for ourselves, merged into that, that whole S1 through S6. And then that's kind of when things started escalating, and then boom, global launches. So I'm friends with Abda. I'm friends. At that time, I wasn't that well acquainted with Steelhard. I just knew him by his name, Chad Thundercock. So it always resonated in my head. So I'm like, I want to be a part of this thing, and they told me Chisgel's involved, and it was a huge project that they were putting together. I'm like, dude, a very last minute thing. I'm like, yeah. And I joined a voice call one day, and I just saw that there's a lot of community, there's a lot of people, having a good old time, and I'm like, damn, I want to be a part of this. It's completely different than the beta servers, and that's kind of how that escalated. And from that very moment is when. So I still have a T5. I still have a T5 account in the early servers, which is kind of bittersweet, but it is what it is.
Okay, got you. Well, no, man. Thanks. I definitely appreciate it. Now, Steel, I guess again, extension to you on this one. I'd love to ask the same thing, right? How did you come about getting involved, if not involved initially, and again, what attracted to you to that project specifically over others?
So, the project was initially started by Abda. At the time, I was still playing in Server 4. And even before Server 4 ended, the first season, Abda contacted me because of his project, right? And he gave me some info and asked me if I was interested in joining the project with him. And I said, look, I'm leading an alliance right now. I can give you an answer right now because I'm just too committed to my alliance right now, and I can just let him down. Moving forward, we'll see if an opportunity arises, and if I feel like it, then I'll give you an answer. And he's a good guy, and he knew that the global release was still quite far away, right? Because season 4 was literally 6 months before global release happened. So there was still plenty of time left until we actually committed and planned things. So then moving on, we went into Server 4, went into the merge, which we ended up losing, but I think it went relatively well, considering the fact that we ended up facing the whole 3 servers by ourselves. I think even up to this day, it was by far the best fights I've had in the game, especially because they lasted so long as well, right?
Yep.
Because the beta servers, the fights were just completely different from what they are in global.
Oh, dude, I will never forget that epic, what it felt like, a week, 2 weeks long, 2.5 weeks long Forgotten Lands, campaign. That's the word I would use, campaign.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. It was non-stop war. It was Server 4 against Server 1, then Server 3 joined, then we fought Server 3, then Server 2 joined, then we fought Server 2 and Server 3, and it was just non-stop war for, I don't know, 4 weeks or something. And looking back, it was very fun, but at the same time, I remember being completely exhausted after a couple weeks,
Yeah.
and just being like, "Oh my god!" I get off bed and like, oh, I gotta log in, I gotta go fight. Yeah, it does get exhausting after a while. I'm not gonna lie. But halfway into that season, yeah, like I said, we ended up losing, and things happened, and I decided to pass leadership over to one of our allies, which at the time was Zero. Actually, I can't remember the name of their alliance.
Oh, is it Zero Fox? Yeah.
Fox, yeah, Zero Fox, I think was the name. Yeah. Was the alliance I gave them? We essentially kind of merged. I sent our best players over to their alliance because throughout the season, right, people just got tired, people quit, and this happened to both sides, not just us, because the activity overall went way down because of all the non-stop war, and we just decided to merge. And I passed on leadership, and I decided that I needed a break. It was just too much for me. I was just way too invested in terms of time commitment. And I just needed a break, and that's when I decided to take the leap and join Abdain's project for Server 32, which at the time he even made me an offer of making me the R5 with him, so essentially like a Core 5, which I took it up, and then we just started planning and started helping around with the project and preparing for the global launch.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so now, so let's move forward a little bit and talk about where you guys currently are in your roles and kind of what do you do for the Blood family now, and specifically, we can talk about Season 1, where you guys started in 32, and then maybe transition to kind of where you are now, if the role or the title's responsibilities has changed or elevated in some way. But when you started off in 32, and Duhz, we'll start with you, then go to Steel. Again, where did you start, and then where did you end Season 1, and just kind of what are you currently doing now as far as tasks and responsibilities?
So when I had spoken to, I had actually spoken to Abda first, and he's like, "Hey, Duhz, you want to come and join this project?" Jumped on board, met Chad. We kind of kicked it off. Really, I was just sort of, R4, helped with some advice and giving players a lot of tips and tricks, suggestions on how to build account, especially T5 players. That was really my place, helping with the events since we had been a part of a lot of the early on elite raids, helping the transition from that as well. And really, that's how it started. Just helping the daily functions wherever they needed me. I was there. I just wanted to help. Just wanted to be a part of that. Like I said, like the community. And as time progressed, how if you've ever done leadership, you say one thing. You're like, yeah, I'm just gonna get in, and I'm just gonna kind of do the bare minimum, help where I'm needed. It never works out that way. It's literally always you end up doing way more than what you signed up for, and that's the nature of the beast. So. From that moment, we kind of continued to work together. I, dove deeper into leadership tasks, anywhere from war leads to helping with any sort of territory, discussions about mapping, et cetera, and player development. And so from that moment, that's when things kind of started kicking off for us. And as the chemistry built or grew rather, that so did our responsibilities. And I think the craziest thing initially, no one ever anticipated, I wasn't a part of the whole preliminary preparation stages of this project, but I was definitely there when we, right before we landed in 32. And no one expected to meet the Dragon family. That wasn't even a thing, right? And so, and I guess that can be for a later, I don't know if you have a question about that later, but that was one of the biggest mind-blowing moments for all of us. And so things started to shift and change as the season progressed. We started to, we obviously reached out to them, set up some sort of Zone 1 regulations where, we're not trying to kill the server. We've been a part of servers where, that you couldn't really save your Zone 1 and give people a place to come back to. And so that was like the ground. They laid out the groundwork initially. And then from that point on, DNS, shout out to Dragon Fam. They, we kept clashing, and they had won their first couple of engagements, and throughout a lot of these engagements, that's when I started to just take more on as far as responsibility. And Chad and I, we've built a pretty solid, brothership, I would say. And from town halls to consistent meetings with the R4s, it's kind of where we stand right now.
Okay, awesome. No, I love it. And then Chad, how about you? Again, same thing. How did you start, and then kind of throughout where are you at now, kind of going into end of season 1, and what are you currently doing?
Early on, I just started doing like a little bit of everything, right? It's just what I used to do in server 4. I had to do pretty much almost everything for my lines, so I just got used to that. So that's also kind of what I started doing in server 32, right? Because let's just say I didn't know best. I didn't know what getting proper help was. I didn't know what having proper R4s to split the work with was.
Delegation.
And that all changed in server 32, and I can't be more thankful for that, because it's completely different from, like, one of the reasons that made me take a break in the beta, right, aside from all the fighting, was the time commitment, like I said earlier. And that's because I had to do everything myself, both for the alliance, for the union, for the actual server, which was composed of like 4 or 5 alliances back then. And it was just too much for only one person to do, especially in a mobile game. And I just felt extremely overworked, and it just led me to burnout, essentially. And thankfully in server 32, I started doing that initially as well, and it quickly shifted into actually having very useful R4s, which I'm very, very thankful for. And
Shout out to our R4s.
Shout out to all our R4s, actually. We essentially do split like tasks. I no longer have to do everything. I just do my own thing. Each and every one of us have our own tasks that we do internally, and we all do them well, and we all work perfectly well together now. It took some time to get used to each other because most of us never played before together. Yep. So there's also that adaptation period, I would say. But overall, like, I couldn't be happier, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't trade any of my current R4s for anyone else.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I will say to that note, and to what Duhz said previously about, kind of getting sucked into leadership, even, when for myself, even when I love and I enjoy doing projects mainly for, I think the community aspect and the social engagement is always the most enjoyable. I think people like to play the game, but I think for some of us, really what we get out of it is being able to form communities and bonds and have good relationships and enjoy hanging out in VCs, or, doing movie nights or playing games, whatever it may be, where you really feel like you're a part of something more than just logging in to do your dailies and play. And it sounds like you guys are definitely on, if not already in it, as good as you can be. And I think when it comes to management itself, to your point, Steel, it is almost night and day when you do work with people that you can say confidently, like, you really know what you're doing, right? Versus people that versus maybe people that haven't played that much, or if they think they know what they're doing, but may not necessarily have the best way of navigating on, well, this is how I can fill in and support best.
It's a huge difference. Like, having someone that actually put in the work, put in the hours, put in the effort, the commitments, and is actually good at what they do. Like, finding people like that to begin with, it's already super, super difficult.
Yep.
But once you have those people, like, it's like I said, it's night and day difference. Like, it's not even comparable.
Yeah.
So you could tell, especially in how your members respond, because normally members respond well to their R5, right? But when the R4s, and it's not just BDO, it's BDM, it goes down the line. When the entire community responds equally to anyone who has a leadership title, that's when you know you got a solid core.
Yeah. No, man, that is definitely the darnest. I love it. Okay, let's move this pony ride, if we will, along a little bit more. So, Again, I want to talk about a little bit more on 32 before we kind of get into Season 2, and I definitely want to hear some of your guys' feedback and thoughts on the merging, on maybe your experiences thus far. But I do want to kind of bring us back just for a moment on the DS or the DNS family situation, right, that ended up transpiring there. Now, from my understanding, obviously, there was not an anticipation that they were going to be coming. However, they represented kind of a different time zone of players compared, or group, we should say, compared to your time zone of group within the family. And again, we'll probably talk about that in a moment. But initially, it started out where you guys had reached out, like you said, there was some back and forth and skirmishes. But I would love to really know a little bit more on how did that start out? Was it them attacking your players first? You guys had attacked some of them. They retaliated. Were they kind of attacking other people before you even got to a point of doing diplomacy? Because the thing I love about these types of situations, especially when it comes to kind of looking at an educational standpoint for the community who may be watching this, is that when you are in a kingdom, this is a pretty, not to say this happens all the time in every kingdom, but this can and will happen in some kingdoms where you will essentially have two big groups, whether it's two big alliances or if it's groups of families, that could be two or more alliances that are kind of vying for control or for majority presence, if you will, within a kingdom, to kind of end up being the decision maker. And in your situation within 32, it just ended up being where you guys kind of went through this trial of tribulations, and now you're kind of working together from my understanding, and it really complements this type of a 24/7 time zone coverage aspect, which is really more of a kind of advanced thing to talk about. But again, give it to me at an entry level, Duhz, if we start with you, and then obviously I'd love to hear from you as well on this deal. But how did everything start? How did the relationship then grow into something, and then how is the relationship now?
So that's a great question. So I don't know if you're aware a little bit of the lore behind DNS, or Dragon Family rather. They're from the Chinese servers in Rise of Kingdoms, and by far the biggest server. They have the biggest alliance in Rock, and they are, I think, the biggest server. They have like 9 or 10 billion alliances, right? Okay. And Sean Kai, who is one of their mini Krakens, is awesome dude, by the way. Shout out to Sean. He's an avid follower of Chisgo, and when I spoke to him, he was from what I understood, and Burning's a part of that project as well. I don't know if you knew that, Ian. They weren't expecting to come to 32. I think from what I remember, they were supposed to land in 31. So I guess what happened was one of the R5s, or whoever had R5 at the time, was sleeping. And so they couldn't make a decision right away on, damn, do we go or do we kind of wait? So the ultimate decision was, let's just wait. And guess where they landed? So, they landed in 32. And initially, I think Chad is here and he'll shine some light on that. But at that time, I'm pretty sure it was shock and awe. No one had anticipated interact or engaging with such a large family. And it wasn't right away. They didn't land in Nivola like we did. I can't recall which zone they landed in initially. Chad, do you remember?
I believe they landed in Forgotten Lands.
Forgotten Lands. Yeah, so they landed in Forgotten Lands, and then immediately the negotiations began, right? And it wasn't like a pissing contest where everyone's kind of sizing each other up. I think it was a mutual understanding of the health of the server. And I think a lot of servers, they forget the fact that you're kind of stuck with each other for a while. I'm not going to say that it was all sunshine and roses, because you've got two different communities that think that they are the best, that believe that they are the best, and their ultimate goal is to win, right? But a lot of servers, a lot of individuals or teams that manage servers forget that your focus is the health of the server and the longevity of the server and your player base. And I think that was understood right out the gates from both families. And, it was, hey, our goal is to win, your goal is to win. We just want some healthy fights. Let's go ahead and set these kind of guidelines. And then moving forward, we'll kind of adjust as it goes. And that's kind of what transpired.
Okay, awesome. No, thanks. Chad, anything you want to add to that?
Not really. This explained real well. I do remember back then we did hear about this Chinese alliance before they even landed, because I do. I had so I'm sure you remember Reaper, right?
Oh yeah.
Before? Yeah. So he's also Chinese, right? And at the time, I remember him telling me that there was this Chinese group, and they were also going for the global release, and they had massive Dragons. At the time, I kind of downplayed it. Like I'll be completely honest, I just didn't realize that there could be any other group that could potentially be as big as BDO right off the bat. I just didn't think of that as a possibility. So I was like, well, it would actually be cool if they landed with us. I said that jokingly, and they actually did, and they were far bigger than I ever thought they were. Like far bigger. Like Duhz said, they are the top one by far in the Chinese servers, and if I'm not wrong, I believe their peak power was 26 or 28 billion, which is which is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, like the top alliances in Rise of Kingdoms in the international servers, I don't think any of them are even 20 billion. So, just to put that into perspective, just how big they are.
The only other one is 1960. Ironically, there were a handful of 1960 players in DNS and Dragon Fam as well.
Yeah, which is also the top one alliance from the international servers.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not only a massive family like BDO is, they're also very heavy spenders. Many of them have been playing together for a very long time, and they have a very clear track record of being the best at what they do.
we had our work cut out for us, BN.
We definitely did.
No, man, listen. It was funny because I heard rumblings of this when it was happening, and people would ping me, and I had a couple conversations with some people there, and they were just kind of giving me bits and pieces as you all were going. And it was, I mean, it was funny. It was the paradigm shift between some of the updates I got was, yo, it's not looking good for BD family, bro, all the way to, okay, yo, things are changing. They won some fights. It's kind of 50-50. And now it's like, okay, wow, they just won a big fight, or they had a big skirmish or two, all the way to, okay, now everything's kind of copacetic and peaceful. And it was just funny because, I wasn't getting daily updates, but it was kind of intermittent. So every time I heard something, it always seemed like a big thing, just because there was a gap of time between when I was told something and I wasn't checking in, obviously, daily or as often as I would have liked to. But yeah, again, from my outside of the box perspective, it definitely felt as though there were big swings on the spectrum, but obviously very happy to see how things played out.
And it's crazy because a lot of people forget that servers started off extremely controversial. Like there were a group of Vietnamese players of Vietnamese Alliance. I can't remember the damn region. Was it Caltia? I believe it was Caltia. That they started in Caltia, and these guys had exploited. They were exploiting, and it was a crazy scenario.
I remember this.
Some of these guys were like, listen, shout out to my boy Quang.
It was the rune thing? Was it the rune thing?
No, it was. All right, I'll go ahead and say it.
The rune thing was way back in the beta.
Oh, okay, that was the beta one. Why am I getting these mixed up?
So this particular thing was they were able to, for some odd reason, they had a group of vendors. I don't know what the hell it was, Chad. Was it like they were able to sell? They were able to kind of get into the games.
No, so what they did, from what I know, like I'm not going to give too many details, but
yeah, you can keep it broad.
Yeah, they were essentially buying packs for free.
Right,
that's what it was. Yeah.
And even the devs were like, yeah, there's really no paper trail here. It was crazy.
I remember someone showed me some screenshots. I remember recalling now.
Yeah. And so they had pushed an insane. One of the guys had like 30 million gems. It was madness, and we were like, how the heck can we even compete with this? Remember, like we had a couple of other Krakens that didn't quite commit to Call of Dragons.
Yeah.
And at that time, the Dragon Fam, they were way more dedicated at that particular moment as far as spending. Yeah. So when our first engagement with them, we had very relatively fewer T5 players than they did. And people don't really understand the magnitude of a T5 account in an early season until you're up against them and literally nothing you can literally throw everything at them, an entire alliance, and one player can sustain that at T5 because you got to figure not every player is a spender. Most of them, they don't have troops. Their tech is, bar none. So when you compare, that was our biggest struggle is how the hell are we gonna, some of these guys we're having a hard time even making a dent.
Well, like the interesting histories and milestones in whether it be kind of game-wide things that happen or impacts from one kingdom to another. All right.
Exactly.
Let's do this. So, again, I know we're coming up on some decent time here so far. So what I'd love to transition to is, again, I'd love to now know, your guys' view when it comes to, when it comes to Season 1, right? I'd love to get some feedback from you both on Season 1 itself. What were your... what are your takeaways now going through? And I know both of you have, but specifically for 32, at least before. But when it comes to this kingdom that you are essentially the most active in, for your Season 1, with how things played out, and again, you could factor in DS and anything else as well that is kind of relevant, if you will, to kind of standard development and progression with Augerstone, etc. But what's your takeaway for Season 1 as far as when it pertains just to the starting home kingdom? Thoughts on just maybe how the season went? Any potential pieces of feedback or changes or ideas, opportunities that you felt could be something that may either improve, whether it be actual changes in game, or maybe even if it's just kind of mental focuses and maybe just kind of how to approach certain things mentally. I would really just love to hear anything and everything as it pertains to Season 1, and then I definitely want to kind of end out with Season 2 and maybe a few other things. But Duhz, let's start with you again.
Yeah, so as far as Season 1, bring back the healing system before. It wasn't broken. I don't think any of us mind the elixir system. I just think that the 6-hour cap is too small of a time window for players, because if you factor in an 8-hour work day on average, and that's NA, I don't know across the world what the average work day looks like, but let's just call it 8 to 10 hours. I think anywhere between that would be super awesome as far as players having the opportunity to log in and clear that healing or that hospital and then go about their day. As far as Season 1, are you speaking more in tune of 32 or just kind of more broadly?
No, I mean it could be anything. If you want to take your 32 experience for what happened in Season 1,
Gotcha.
Or even if it was in S5, or again if there's other things you've noticed.
So the jump from S5 to 32 is night and day, apple and oranges. So in S5, like the early beta servers, everything was slow paced, and you had a very specific player base, right? Because of who was allowed to play and who wasn't, as far as where the regions were or where the game allowed the game to be downloaded or played. So the player base was a lot different, and I think a little bit less hardcore. But now that you have this international global launch, you've got a mix of players from everywhere, and it's like from all different facets of gaming, and it's really intense. As far as 32 and Season 1 there, I think it went as good as it could have gone, considering a lot of circumstances that were transpiring. Having 2 massive parties with, obviously everyone has some sense of pride. They have their own confidence levels, and they have their aspirations as far as what they want to accomplish as a unit. And when you can get two Goliaths like that to work together, you create something special. And I would consider 32 an anomaly, because not a lot of servers would have been able to bring that kind of unity and understanding and the insanely high level of communication that we have, myself and Chad and other leaders from Blood Family, that with the Dragon family. Those guys have been really easy to work with. The time zones, you would think that they were. Sometimes I think they're NA because I'm talking to Burning all day. You know what I'm saying? And I'm pretty sure he feels the same way about us, because sometimes it could be 2, 3, 4 a.m. We're still having leadership conversations. Don't do that, by the way. Don't go degen. But so like that. That's kind of where I'm at. I think it's been an excellent experience. I'm super thankful and super lucky to have been a part of this, and I'm definitely looking forward to working with these guys and Blood Family and growing.
Awesome. No, I love it. I love it. Steel, how about you before we kind of open it up to some more interesting and colorful topics?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. Server 32, the season 1 was definitely way different than most other servers will experience for sure. Especially because we did have very intense fights, definitely more intense than any other server could, especially due to, well, like the cheating situation, right, which led to a very catastrophic Z1 opening, as well as just even before the Z1 opening, we already had some agreements with DNS, because like Duhz said, they have been extremely easy to reach out to reach agreements with us, and we've always prioritized the well-being of the server, right? So people think that having a super high-power alliance with a lot of spenders is really awesome, and it's all roses, and it's really not. It's a completely different player base. On the server, on the beta servers, people were completely fine with spending a month farming and progressing their accounts, while on 32, if we spent a month farming, people would start losing their minds. It's completely different. The player base, it's not even comparable at all.
Exactly. You're dealing with a I don't want to. How do I say this without being crucified by the guys? But you're dealing with individuals that have a higher than average level of expectations, a thirst, right? Their expectations are perfection. You know what I mean? And a lot of that goes, it's understandable investment of, not only financial, but, obviously your time investment. Like I said, these guys are hardcore. Back in the beta, you had your less hardcore players. These guys are insane. They're intense. They want results. They want victory. And even if it's not victory, it has to be glamorous, right? A glamorous defeat. So it's not all sunshine and roses, as Chad said, man. It's a lot of work, and you can't fumble or stumble because they're on you.
Yeah, 100%.
No, I can definitely, I can definitely see and understand that. Whether it's realistic or unrealistic expectations, it most of the time usually falls on the people that are, kind of behind the scenes and making the cogs spin as best they can, and hopefully for as long as they can. All right, let's, if we can, as we kind of near this out, I'd love to hear your thoughts now on, maybe I don't want to say we can kind of get to some more of the controversial stuff, but I would love to kind of get to more of our, Baskin Robbins Catch Your 32 flavors, if you will, of lovely topics here on matchmaking. So going into your season, again, I don't know if either of you watched. I would assume so, because I know we were briefly talking about it before we started. But when I went through all of the 64 kingdoms and essentially pulled all the data for them, and we looked at kind of what the top 64 kingdoms were looking like for your group, from 1 all the way to 64. We looked at the top 100 alliances, top 100 players that I pulled data for. I would love to get your thoughts on, again, how do you feel about the matchmaking system for how it played out specifically with where 32 ended up? And do you do you have any solutions or ideas on maybe how you would have liked to seen it, if you would have liked to seen a change at all? And Duhz, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Steel.
Yeah, I don't think any of us anticipated that it almost seemed like it was like an AABB format. Although I don't. It's weird because S32 may be placed in that bracket, but we're far from an A. I would consider us being the closest thing to what an Imperium would look like, right? Yeah. And I know that's probably a huge issue for the devs, and they're trying to work their way around it. But we've got Nephisto's gang over in 33, so we were looking forward to that. And so because of that, our response to the matchmaking was that we have to give our players the best opportunity to have a good time while also challenging ourselves and not just brutally steamrolling over everything. So we decided to kind of split our server to a point where it's almost like a free-for-all. And there's like this running meme right now where 32 ultimately has to fight ourselves. And we don't like that. We want to work together against an equally matched opponent or opponents. where we don't have to focus on it, meeting each other in the end, if that makes sense.
Or 34, yeah, even 34, right?
Another thing to add to that is we have 32 and V who defected from the Dragon family, who used to be DNH. We've already lost an extension of the Dragon family, right, due to whatever reason. So you've got 32, 34, 46, and 48. If we stood strong, as Chad said, as united, it would have been over already. So we put ourselves in a position to accept challenge and give our players a elongated fight across the season, which I hope is still true.
Yeah, no, I got you. It's it's funny because I have heard I've seen some reports kind of here and there, and just heard some things in regards to, some reasonings or justifications for why it really wasn't kind of a top four. Now, my view it was pretty straightforward. I know when I covered the 64 kingdoms and talked about how I would potentially like to see groups being done, and even though they kind of split it 50-50, so to speak, or like 40-60 if you will, for what seemed to be 31 through 50 on those kind of 20 kingdoms, and then they ended up grouping it from 51 onwards, and then 27-30 got grouped essentially in increments in chronological order of 4. To me, it just felt a lot easier to say, well, let's just pair the strongest up with each other, because otherwise it just, like I said, unless you do where it's like 1-2 and then you did 64-63 3-4 62-61, like if you did something like that, then okay, maybe you can make a case for that type of variant. But I think when it comes to the players themselves on, if there was any fear or any worry or caution on saying, hey, let's just pair the 4 strongest kingdoms up, and then, what would happen if 32 got stronger? I think one of the easy ways to fix that, or to provide a kind of a stopgap, is you just adapt the amount of people that can join the strongest kingdoms, right? Like, even if you want to treat it as some type of a kind of back-end Imperium type approach, right? You basically not value it, but you basically would say, like, well, if you're the number 1 strongest kingdom, maybe you only get 20 spots, right, of people that could join you in a season, and then then number 2 would be 30, number 3 would be 40, right? Like, you can make it, they can adjust it like that. Now, I don't know, obviously, if they thought of it in that moment, but if you're trying to think about how can we set up groups to have the best fights, hopefully the most sustainable fights, where you're not seeing kind of these wide swings of power imbalance, but at the same time also make it reasonable and logical for which kingdoms are going to be allotted how many migration spots, per season. As an example, I think that's one way that you could do it, where you still could have seen your guys' pairing for 31 through 34, but just limiting the amount of migration spots that 32 got. Right?
Well, Ian, let me ask you this then. Since you say that, do you believe that would be the format that they approach this with, as far as giving us actual spots? Because as it stands right now, nobody knows the formula, right? So you don't know where the threshold is. Yeah. And I would almost imagine that they would have to announce that this is the direction, and if it's already not developed that way, they would have to almost reconfigure the migration system. Because as it stands, especially with matching, if they're going to go like an AABB or AAAA or whatever, the formats that you would normally see in a Rise of Kingdoms, matchmaking, then they would almost have to, like, I don't know, because Resurgence kind of nullifies that. I mean, if I'm 32, I can go in and I can just resurge anywhere and just destroy the server. You know what I mean? So almost maybe forcing zones and stuff like that. I don't know, but I was curious to see. Do you think that that's how they could approach it based on your knowledge? Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think everything's connected. I think, like you said, for the Resurgence point on where you're starting, the fact that you can go to any, you don't have a dedicated starting zone like you do in Rock, where you can't go to another Zone 4 or Zone 1 if you just want to consider, however you title it. But, when you go into your KvK season, you're basically, your kingdom goes into a group. You not only do you have to think about the fact that you can move freely between different regions if you're willing to resurge, because if you're someone who spends resurging, the biggest impact to you is really just
the 50% hospital bill that that you're going to get stuck with, or having to retrain because policies are reset, so you don't really have to worry about that. As long as you're okay taking the hit, you can still go around and essentially fight to your heart's content to an extent, of course. But obviously you have that not only with Resurgence, but you have the fact that alliances can join whoever they want. Right, so it's not as that there's no absolute guarantee that everyone's going to stick, even though the trend we've been seeing thus far is that more often than not, kingdoms are going in more unified rather than ununified going into their KvK groups, which is kind of the opposite perspective of for the people out there who've read any of the dev columns or the dev feedbacks along with things that they've said publicly, even though it's only been bits and pieces here, so you really have to be paying attention. But they basically said that they kind of want to go in this direction of more of an alliance focused game rather than it being kind of a kingdom focused game like Rock. But the challenge is that just like anything, you can create something, but it doesn't always mean that your intended use is going to be the way that the community uses it, or the way that they play it out. And this kind of goes into what I don't know if you guys saw the video I did about kind of like what the devs don't want you to know. It's the one I put out yesterday, and where I kind of
where did you post that?
It's on my channel, but it's basically a video that talks about the kind of big picture about what kingdom builders are, why kingdoms are susceptible to trending in certain directions from day one, why it is that developers thrive off kingdom instability. For them, it's really more of a win. And that wasn't to point out any specific kingdom, but I talked about some of these things and about how you have things like the ladder climbing effect, how leaderboards factor in, the fact that you can go into different zone and regions, and how rogues can be. I mean, there's so much that really goes into it. But I think from, like I was saying, I think from the Resurgence to the fact that you can join any alliance in any starting region that you want, there's not necessarily kind of this default level of loyalty or sense of camaraderie within a kingdom like there is in Rock, because you're kind of, like you alluded to earlier, you're kind of stuck with these people for a while. So you kind of have to learn how to figure it out. And then on top of that, you have to think about, well, how does migration play a factor into that? Because we don't obviously know exactly what that number is on how many people can go in. How are they setting certain tiers of full to busy to active or fully open on how many people can go in, because obviously it doesn't seem like there's power thresholds from what we may or may not know, right? So you could arguably have, if you got 100 spots, you could have the 100 strongest players going in from those three kingdoms to try and get into one, right? Because we don't know what those things are. So, and then you factor in, if you are going to be that strong, and you look at like kind of what the situation is right now in SSS1-8 with TATM, GRZ, UEH, right? Some of those alliances there on, well, how much fighting will there be really at the end of the day? Because, like we've seen before in some of the beta merge kingdoms, right? You could have, a lot of fighting for 1 or 2 days and it being a short-term fix. And, then you end up kind of going into what you would consider Farmville, or, the fact is that you're not getting a lot because the matchups are so drastically uneven. So I think all of those things, and again, I'm only obviously hinting at a few, and I don't want to get off on a tangent because I could talk for days on this. But what I will say is I think those are some of the big important factors you have to look at when you're going through matchmaking. But as far as solutions, yeah, I think when it comes to if you're trying to pair number for number, pound for pound, like 1 through 4 on the power list for kingdoms, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, etc. I think the way that you would do it to try and mitigate is you allot a specific number of slots to kingdoms that can join. Regardless if you want to get into the intricacies of, doing it like Imperium Zero, where they say, well, you can have one person over whatever the 25 or 35 mil cap is, right? And you get one per month. You can talk about that later. But I think if you're just trying to come up with a simple foundation to try and, I don't want to say limit, but try to create some sense of kind of equality spread out through as many. Because, you have to look at it like this, right? If you're talking big picture, the idea is... Do you want to have kingdoms that are so power dispersed that every time you go into a KvK, it's just not going to be fun for you because you're just not going to get as many people that are going to enjoy wanting to fight against you as possible? And you can make an argument that that's kind of where 32 is right now, right? Like there's no right answer. But, or do you want to try and create an environment within a game where you have as many kingdoms that are as close in power as possible, Therefore, instead of it being who's the strongest, it comes down to who is the most strategic, who is the most tactical. We're talking more about true skill here, where you're able to get more long-term, enjoyable, and sustainable fights. And to me, that's what it is. You know, like regardless if you agree or you disagree with it, you have to understand that player psychology is such a big factor into how they visually look at things like leaderboards and matchups ahead of time. And that drastically plays into whether or not they're going to be motivated or engaged enough to actually show up to fight, right? Because that's what it is at the end of the day. You're trying to convert as many people over to fight as possible to hopefully have everyone enjoy as much PvP. And so it's interesting because I wonder if, and last thing I'll say here is I just wonder if we're going to eventually see more situations where if matchups are really unfair, the kingdoms or alliances that are kind of on that got the shorter end of the stick, if they'll just say to themselves, we're just not going to fight. And they just immediately exhaust the flame right from the room, where now it's okay, well, are the stronger kingdoms just going to fight amongst themselves? Are they going to bully and just go and hit everyone farming? And that's going to be their... I just can't see that being fun for the stronger kingdoms.
Exactly.
And that's just my general view. I feel like I'm kind of getting counter-interviewed now. But that's a long answer that I gave, so I apologize. But that's my view on it. So.
Well, I think that their whole merger system is kind of working against itself, right? Because on one end, you want to avoid a snowball effect by overpowering specific servers or any server in general. But at the same time, that's kind of what the merging system does, is it creates this kind of unofficial snowball effect. Look at TATM. Before the demerger came to be, that's kind of what was happening. You would merge into a server, you would fight, absorb, and then move forward. And in theory, it still exists, but it doesn't because now you have, migration caps and stuff. So I'm interested to see if they raise the cap for migration. I had a hard time getting into S2, by the way, on my other account. Finally was able to do it, and they moved some accounts out, and finally they freed up some space. But we don't know if it was based on just player number. Was it a power threshold that we were able to fall under? We don't know. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops.
Is there anything that either of you feel, and again, maybe we'll start with you this time, Steel, then go to Duhz, any opportunities that you see within the game, maybe things you would love for them to kind of double down on and invest a little bit more in, maybe scale back, maybe switch up, any features, ideas that you just think would be great for the game, or, again, if it's any changes you'd like to see?
Yeah, so, well, I recently made 3 suggestions, right? And I am also thinking about adding a new one. I just haven't had time. One of them is I would like them to reduce the period at the end of the season, right? Because the season ends within, I believe, 60 days, the Augur Stone. And the last 20 days or the last 30 days are entirely just Farmville. Like, as the game stands, there's literally nothing to do. I guess adding more events and Arc of Osiris, the arena. I guess they could fix it to an extent, but the underlying issue, I don't think it's gone, even if you had more events. I'm not really sure how you would fix that either, because I'm pretty sure that's entirely because of matchmaking. Maybe it fixes itself as there are more servers on the line. I don't know. We'll have to see. But if I had the option, I would prefer if they reduce the time, the resting period at the end of the season. The other suggestion would be giving us more clarity regarding the migration system, and potentially even adding some sort of king system, so that you actually get to pick who joins the server and who doesn't. Simply because we literally have zero information on how migration works, except, yeah, you guys can migrate at the end of the season and you pay 5k gems, that's it. That's literally all the information we have about it. We have zero clue how it works.
Yeah.
So, I would like for some more information, because it's, for any actual competitive server, any competitive alliance, migration is and will always be the backbone of any alliance. Because if you're in this for the long term, you will need to migrate people in, and you will need to do recruiting from outside your server, and migration is the only way you can do that. So I think clarity is pretty much mandatory for this kind of game, and for all the competitive alliances. The third suggestion was completely getting, or at least changing the alliance resets on new seasons, because from someone that has went through 4 merges or so, or something like that so far, it gets really troublesome and really annoying even to having to deal with the alliance resets every single season, because players, at least from my experience, they want to be with their friends, and they want to be with their community, and being forced to split the whole community into 4 or 5 alliances, to me that's completely toxic, and that's the opposite of what they should be doing, which is promoting a community, promoting a fun time, and to keep players engaged into the game. Because if there's... So the season system, right, it's good because it brings people back into the game, expecting new content, right? That's something that happens to every game that has seasons, battle passes, stuff like that. However, it also loses because I see a lot of people quitting because they can't get into the main alliances with their friends.
Yep.
And it can take over a month to get people into the main alliance, because it just takes time, right? It just takes time for the behemoths to unlock, for the technology to progress. So from both an alliance perspective, a leadership perspective, which is a lot of work and a lot of dedication and a huge time sink to prepare for everything in each new season, as well as from your average player point of view, like, I think the alliance reset either has to change or just remove it completely. As for the last suggestion that I would do, and I would honestly think that if these 4 suggestions were implemented or changed in a way, I generally believe the game would be in a very, very near perfect state, without adding more content, right? Because we do need more content as well. The game is very bare bones still compared to Rise of Kingdoms. But again, that's just something that comes with a time frame. Over time, they will add more events for sure. So the last suggestion would be reverting or increasing the elixir healing. I still think 6 hours is too, like, it's too short. It just is. Even with the villages on the S1 Plus season, you can maybe raise it to 7, maybe 8 hours, but it's still way too short. People gotta sleep, people gotta work, especially for the bigger spenders, right? People that usually spend a lot on these games are people that are usually busy IRL, so they spend to compensate the time that they need to be online, right? And it's a huge difference for those players specifically, because they just don't have the time to be logging in every few hours into the game. As well as, it's not only the time commitment, but it just feels like a chore. Going from logging in and all your troops being healed, and having to actually log in every few hours, and actually going over to the hospital and clicking heal, like, it just feels like an extra chore that you don't really want to do compared to what it was before. I get the idea of the elixir system. I don't completely dislike it, because it could promote even more fighting, right? If the system was perfect, because then you have like extra healing for the first day. So it could promote more fighting, but the way it stands, I think it does the opposite in the long run, where there will be way less fighting, way less fighting, and it's also a chore, which is annoying for everyone involved. And I just think that the old healing system was better, but I can see the elixir system working if they tweak it some more.
Okay. Okay, love it. No, man, thank you so much. All right, Duhz, let's wrap it up with your beautiful barber-like mustachio that we have a picture of you for. Your thoughts.
So look, man, the beard gang.
Yep.
So yeah, look, Chad pretty much covered everything. He executed it perfectly. I'm going to take a different approach, but I do want to highlight a little bit on the elixir system. I love the fact that you get to individually select the unit type. Some people would argue that kind of creates a different level of imbalance, especially for whales, but I think it's brilliant to be able to select the specific troop type because of strategies, right? If we're low on, let's say we're low on infantry, but we need flag builders. Well, look, you can go and heal 50K, you know what I mean? Or 100K, and you still have the capacity, or rather capability, of healing archers if you need to, or cabs if you need to rally. Cabs are meta for rallies. So, you know, that's kind of my whole idea on it, and I totally agree with Chad as far as the cap currently as it stands. Before, you could work your, as I said earlier in the interview, you could work your 8 to 10 hour workday. You could come in, you could click your hospitals, and be good to go, ready to jump back in the fight. Now, if you log in at the same place where you left off. And I think that is super counterproductive to what the game should be, or what they had envisioned as far as fighting all the time, right? So I totally agree there. I also think that the village system is a little silly right now. So when it comes to villages, you have an occupancy cap, right? And I just don't understand the method behind that, because if I'm offline for 6 to 8 hours due to sleep or work, and you know, if you're in an international server, you're either NA or EU or Asian, and everyone or anyone else, player base is online and active, but you're not, depending on your region, you could miss out on that cap. And yes, I think it caps at like 70 or 80, but there's usually more than 70 or 80 people in an alliance. So I think they should remove any kind of occupancy, right? And kind of allow the alliance itself to reap those benefits, because they kind of nerfed the village system in general. I don't even think you generate resources from it or buffs. So there would really be no harm in that, right? To allow the players to heal, if you're going to cap us in all these angles. Let's talk about elite raids. So I hate the fact that you get a participation frame. I would rather the gems, rewards, speed ups, things like that, resources, be the incentive for participating, but the frame is alliance based. That way, it's a leadership nightmare to have to tell people, sorry, you kicked ass. You were number 41. But unfortunately, you weren't top 40, and we have to give the frames to the top 40 players, even though you did the best that you could. I think it's silly. It's completely counterintuitive to what they're trying to, promote as this being a very well-balanced game. I think that works against leadership. It really gives us a nightmare as far as being able to attune who gets to get the frames. What else? So I think I would love to see the devs shift from this alliance-based mentality. I think, realistically speaking, people love community. No matter what it is we do, where we go, in any environment from the beginning of time, community is something that we naturally and organically try to develop and establish. And if you want to continue this game in a healthy, I would believe, path, allow players to, allow things to be more or less server-based. Whether that means allowing us to have some sort of control on who gets to come into our server or not, as Chad says, or also get to kind of retain to some degree our alliance shell, maybe just nerf the tech, nuke the tech a little bit, let us still have a 80 to 100 member cap. That way we could have some sense of normalcy and somebody has a place to call home. But for the most part, I think that's pretty much it for me. That's
okay.
What I would like to see change.
Okay, awesome. No, man, I think great points on either side. Something I was throwing around in one of my recent videos is probably something I'll chime in on some of the topics Chad made, which I still have to chime in on a few. I think one of the things they could try doing is just leaving the member capacity, not necessarily as is, but like lower the max end of the cap, but still allow everyone who's in the alliance to stay there. Right? So like if you have 150 people before the first season ends, but the cap's still going to go down to 40, then at least allow for it to be 150 over 40, right? Even if you have to work the cap back up, sure, it may seem tedious, but at least you do not have to sacrifice those players where you're going to have to deal with all of that logistical nightmare. And I'm not necessarily saying that's the end-all be-all solution, but I do think that could be a good stepping stone fix in the right direction, where you don't have to worry as much about that. I think
or just completely nerf like tech in general. Just leave the member cap. Leave it alone.
No, exactly. Yeah, like if you still want to do the reset for tech, because I kind of get that where it still allows for you to continue doing tech donations, especially if you've already maxed your tech out, so you at least still get some alliance credits from it. Like I can understand, like I can wrap my head around that. Unless they're going to implement some other type of system where you can accumulate specifically alliance credits outside of obviously helps, but just in another way that you can do it, or where you're getting more, then, again, you can sell me on that unless, again, there's another great idea. But if the main, I think the biggest thing on the resets is and has to be the member capacity resets. That seems to be the most impactful overall.
The thing is, like, there's a lot of different technologies that you can research, and I totally agree with them resetting 100%. I think it makes it more fun because it gives the players an objective to go for it, right? Because it forces people to be online, it forces activity, and I think giving people a new objective every new season, I think it's cool. It's nothing new, right? It's something they did before, but it's still something that they will have to do in each new season. The thing is, there's only 3 technologies out of maybe 40 different ones in the alliance technology that give player slots, which are the divine covenants. So it could be as simple as simply locking those 3 technologies to their maximum every season, and you would essentially begin with, like, I don't know how many it is, but I think it's like 100 slots or 100 something.
Yeah.
When the 3 divine covenants are maxed.
Yeah.
So those 3 would be locked, and then you could just have to research everything else. And I think that would be a perfectly fine balance.
Yeah. No. I can see that. The interesting part is that because they lower the amount of behemoths as well. And
which also affects the member count.
Exactly. So I'm actually not mad at that as I'm brainstorming in my head right now on what you just said. Maybe what they could even do is increase the number of player slots, like the cap limit increase on those 3 technologies, and then lock them, as you said. Right, so maybe they increase it by double the amount, and now you can be at 150, for example. Right, something that compensates for the member cap loss that you're missing out on because of the lowered amount of behemoths. Right, something I actually kind of like that type of hybrid mixture. I want to have to think about that more, but I kind of like that direction. Okay, awesome. All right, guys, listen, I am probably, by the time I get done going through this and making it super saucy pants, we'll probably be at somewhere around an hour or a little bit longer. And I know we're probably over your guys' limit. I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. This has been an absolute blast. I'll have to try and edit my random departures while still being able to hear your guys' feedback, so people don't think that I just dipped out and I'm just this awful interview where I can't just sit still for an hour and a half with all this stuff going on. But I digress. Still very much appreciate the time. I love the chat. Man, I'll be honest, there's so much more I really want to get to and I would have loved to get to, but I will potentially have to save that for another time and just say thank you for what you've given me thus far and the time that you've allowed for me to sit down and talk with you. And again, it's been awesome to kind of hear the upbringings all the way to where you guys are at, to your thoughts on kind of how the game is right now and some opportunities that you feel currently exists in the game. So the last thing I'm going to do is shout-outs, declarations, rivalry, shades you want to throw, call-outs, whatever it may be. Duhz, you go first, then we'll go to Steel.
Shout out to the Blood family. Shout out to Dragon family. Much love and respect to you guys always. And listen, Farlight, Lilith, we want 31, we want 33.
I wouldn't say it better.
Got you.
We want 31, we want 33. Bring them.
All right, declaration. The gauntlet has been thrown. Dun, dun, dun. All right, Steel, how about you? Give it to us.
It's pretty much the same. It's shout out for Blood family, Dragon family, all of 32 essentially. And yeah, especially server 33. That's really the one that we have our sights on. That's our main target.
Let's do it.
Awesome. I love it.
Thanks, BN. Appreciate you so much, brother.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Oh yeah, man. No, I again always happy, and again glad we were able to get this one in the book. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this out real quick, which again is a big thank you to our guests today, Duhz and Steelhard, our boy CTC, and again for you all out there. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. This has been a great conversation, and hoping to do and continue doing more of these as well in kind of different ways throughout the community. So with that being said, I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below. Let us know. Just remember, any bad feedback that you have on me, my name for this interview is either Duhz or Steelhard. So just keep that in mind when you're leaving any potential feedback. Outside of that, that's going to do it for us. As always, until next time, and I guess us temporarily, we'll catch you later.